Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. The mission of the show is to spread awareness on mindfulness practices, psychology, mental health, psychotherapy, and spirituality. My job on the show is to invite world class performers to share the practices to live a fulfilled life. This episode guest is Kerene. Kerene is the managing director of Mindful at Work, a business hell-bent on making the M words cool in the workplace, mindfulness and meditation. Kerene wants to get the message out that mindfulness is not just limited to meditating, but includes a set of robust, well-researched practices which, when implemented powerfully, impact people's lives and positively change workplace culture. Her new book, Crazy Busy, targets people suffering from the relentless pace of modern life, people who struggle to switch off and are looking for effective strategies to help to reconnect with what really matters, their lives, their work, and the people close to them. She enjoys minimalist apartment living, walking along the waterfront in the fabulous city of Wellington, New Zealand, writing, yoga, reading movies, spending time with the family, and sharing good coffee and excellent red wine with her friends. And now let the episode begin. Kerene, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Did I say your name correctly?
Pretty good. Yeah, it's a very difficult name. It's a made-up Australian name, Kerene. So it's challenging.
Well, dear listeners, we have Kerene all the way from Wellington, New Zealand. How would your family describe what you do for a living?
I think it's only been recently that I've really allowed my family to know what I do for a living. I think I've avoided it for a long time, mainly because my mother tends to get anxious about this daughter of hers running her own business and gets and finds that the topic of mindfulness is confusing for her and complicated. So we've avoided that topic for some time until I wrote my book and Crazy Busy and sent it to her, and then she had a lot more detail around what I do. And my sons, I have two adult sons, and while I know they're terribly proud of me and what I do, mindfulness is quite a difficult conversation to have with your adult sons.
So, how is this mindfulness space in New Zealand?
I think it's in a very healthy space. We have a Prime Minister in New Zealand who is a woman who has a small child and a stay-at-home husband. And one of her name is Jacinda Ardern. And one of her key messages in politics is around kindness. And I believe kindness is a huge component of mindfulness. And to be kind is not a soft, naff, ineffective way of being, but takes an awful lot of courage, discipline, generosity, compassion, empathy. And so, yeah, I think that the current climate in New Zealand, and certainly in the last couple of years, is that mindfulness has become quite well known in the business world. It's no longer thought of people just sitting around meditating all day, but understanding that it's about getting us into peak performance states, whatever we're doing, at work or at home or whatever, and that when people are more engaged, when they are enjoying what they're doing, when they have the skills to play nicely together in the workplace, that it can have a profound impact on business. So, yeah, I think it's in a really healthy space. It was probably only 5 years ago when I first ventured into bringing mindfulness into businesses, we were talking about it, that it was deemed woo-woo, not important, irrelevant. But the world has changed. I think the world is changing remarkably quickly. And so, yeah, in the business world in New Zealand and Australia, mindfulness is seen as, often it's seen as a wonderful thing for stress reduction. And we all know that practicing mindfulness is far more than stress reduction and just being able to focus your attention and be more productive and effective. It's far more than that. But that has been an access way into business in New Zealand. And as one of my friends who works in this space often says, is that we get into business whatever way they'll take us, and then it's kind of mindfulness by stealth, so that you can actually really influence the culture of a business, but you've got to get in there first, and that can be the biggest challenge.
It is a challenge. And what was your motivation to get into the mindfulness space?
I think my personal motivation was dealing with a crisis in my own life just over 10 years ago. That was my personal motivation. But I'd been training as a coach, I'd been studying the neuroscience, I'd been completely absorbed actually in the neuroscience and the research. So that was what really excited me. And I knew that if I could speak that language to people and make it accessible for people, then it was going to be really beneficial in anybody's life, but particularly in the business world. I have a corporate background, so
Mindfulness is space in the business world. But before that, I would like to ask you that is there any experience from your life that comes to your mind when any sort of crisis or struggle or challenge that led you to be in the mindfulness space? If you can share any instance from your life.
yeah, I guess what I would say, Nishant, is that I was a person who grew up with a very strong aversion to, I'd never heard of mindfulness, but I definitely heard of meditation. And I was completely disinterested. And I was also completely disinterested really in people who were meditating. I thought they were a bit odd, hippie, woo-woo types. And it wasn't until I had what I refer to as my bathroom floor moment, which was when life really brought me to my knees, and I knew that I had to start looking after myself differently. That all of the reading that I had been doing around meditation, it seemed to me that that would be an excellent self-care opportunity, because I've always been into physical health and fitness in a big way. But it was really when life brought me to my knees, when my second marriage ended, that I was in a very dark and difficult place, and so that's when I started to practice. I'm a huge admirer of people who start meditating younger or come to it as just kind of like curious seekers of, there's got to be something more. I'm not that person. I'm the person that needs to be broken before I'll look at actually doing something differently. And meditation was the thing that I started doing. And as soon as I started seeing the benefits in myself from doing these practices, I realized that the people I was coaching would really benefit from these practices. So I brought it into my one-on-one coaching world before actually writing programs and taking it into the business world.
And what benefits did you see in your personal and professional life through meditation?
Well, my professional life has always been very good. But I think professionally, it just made me a much better listener. I was far more able to be present, to be there, to really listen on all levels, and to build relationships. So from a leadership perspective, I believe leadership is all around influencing, and hopefully influencing in the right direction. So it really it really has a powerful impact on you as a leader. But I think personally, it was more about tuning into my own needs. I had a personal history of not listening to my intuitive voice, you could call it, definitely in personal relationships. I kind of like squashed it down whenever it raised its ugly head that things weren't particularly okay, and just pushed on in my career. So mindfulness was really a way of tuning into me, who I really was, what I wanted, what I didn't want, and being able to find the courage to say what I needed when I needed it, and to tell the truth. Actually, is probably
This
to
is
tell
very
the truth.
powerful and this is very interesting, caring. So, understanding the benefits of meditation, it can
Mm,
transform our personal and professional life. And what I'm
mm,
hearing you saying that you were not listening to your intuition, your inner voice in your
yeah,
personal life.
yeah.
And through meditation, when you started listening to that inner voice, could you please explain to our listeners what breakthroughs you got in your personal life when you started listening to your inner voice?
Yes, sure. It's probably multiple, multiple
Please,
breakthroughs.
or one or two or three.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of examples. I've always been a very diplomatic person. I can meet anybody and I can form a relationship very, very quickly, because I tend to be able to connect with people very, very easily. So I'm very good at reading people. I'm very good at reading other people's needs and being able to meet those needs. But I was not at all good at recognizing my own needs or meeting those needs. Now, many women, I would imagine in particular, can relate to this, but I'm sure men can too. But definitely, and I'm stereotyping here, but women tend to be brought up, particularly women of my era, to be caring and to look after others and to be as selfless as possible are attributes that we admire in women. And so it's very easy to overlook your own needs and to meet everybody else's needs. And what tends to happen with that is that after a while, you don't know who you are any longer. You don't even know what your needs are. And you certainly don't know how to meet them. You don't know how to ask for what you need. In fact, you can feel very selfish even thinking about what your own needs are and asking for them. So a huge part of tuning into your intuition, your inner knowing, whatever you want to call it, is actually just understanding that you need to take precedence. You need to take priority in your own life. And that can always sound very selfish, but the fascinating thing is that when you start looking after yourself, you start really tuning into what feels right and what doesn't feel right and what you need, and being able to ask for what you need, that you give other people permission to do the same. But because you're looking after yourself well, you have, as my friend Shirley says, you need to fill your own cup first, because you cannot give to others when your own cup is empty. So it's very much about looking after yourself, self-care, self-love, self-compassion, if you like. And that brings out the best in you, which means that you can actually then be the best for other people.
And it can be a myth in the world of mindfulness that if we work on our self care, this is selfish. But actually, this is not a selfish mode.
No,
Selfish means we are manipulating others to meet our needs. But in this mindfulness meditation, we are not manipulating anybody else to meet
mm,
our needs. We are filling our cup first before we give love to somebody else. We cannot operate from a place of lack.
exactly. And I think a really big part of communication and how mindfulness has been so powerful for me is that even if I knew what I wanted, I would tell myself that I couldn't ask for it, or that if I told the truth that it would offend somebody and I would upset somebody. Whereas when you can deliver a message with kindness and generosity, even if it's a message you know another person doesn't really want to hear, the way that you deliver it with mindfulness tends to make it all the more palatable for other people. So it's not such a, it's, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that in communication, if we're unaware of the stories we're telling ourselves in our own minds about why we can't ask for what we need, or what someone will do if we say such and stuff, if we're unaware of those stories, we're going to limit ourselves. With mindfulness, we expose those stories. We can put them in the corner a little bit, if you like, and just actually have the honest, open communication and open up a space of possibility in the relationship that will never be there if we cannot tell the truth.
Exactly. And meditation is one of the mindfulness practices. So, in your personal life, do you have other sort of practices?
Yeah, sure. My formal meditation practice is an evening practice. I practice every evening, but I also do quite a lot of yoga. And I consider that mindfulness is really just life. You know, meditation is your formal sitting practice so that you can actually be present in your everyday life and respond as your best self, moment to whatever is in front of you. So I consider life really as my mindfulness practice. But I do have things that I use as triggers to remind me to be present during the day. So in my conversations, I use conversations as a trigger to really be present and really to listen. I live right in a very beautiful part of New Zealand in Wellington, and I walk along the waterfront most days and just paying attention to the beauty of the place, acknowledging people as they pass me, smiling, making eye contact, just regularly pausing during the day and taking a few deep breaths. I tend to use a lot of little triggers in my day to remind me to be present.
What are those triggers?
Well, just going outside, conversations with other people, and at the moment we're virtual conversations, so any conversation, whether virtual or otherwise, and looking up when I go outside, pausing and taking a few deep breaths, stopping regularly while I'm working on my laptop, just feeling my feet on the floor and looking out the window. I showed you the view before, Nishant, so it's a beautiful view.
Yeah, sometimes it's not easy for human beings to stop and take a pause. We constantly want to juggle from one thing to another.
Yeah.
So, how can we remind ourselves to take a pause and slow down? Because it helps in our productivity and creativity. What can we do about it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Well, you know, I often at speaking events, I say to people, you know, when I talk to people about mindfulness and I talk to them about stopping and pausing, when I talk to people about being more present in their lives, because that's when we're happiest, is when we're present. It's also when we're far more likely to be able to be our best selves, when we're present and aware. Nobody ever says to me, "Oh no, I don't want to be present. You know, I'm just quite happy as I am." People absolutely get it. We know that we're all suffering from lack of presence, from being constantly distracted, from doing the headless chicken act, from being crazy busy, rushing, multitasking, all the rest of it. But the thing is, wishing and wanting to be present is useless. You can't wish and want to be present if you've spent the last 20, 30, 40, whatever years it is, wiring yourself to be absent, as most adults have. And I think today, technology, the pace of life just really ups the ante. So we have this innate propensity for mind wandering, and modern life and technology just feeds it steroids. So we've got to have a practice to actually rewire ourselves to be able to be present. So a beautiful teacher of mine in Australia, Maya Betson, she said, we're not learning with mindfulness how to be present. We are unlearning how to be not present. If we are hardwired to be absent, to be functioning on autopilot, wishing and wanting to be present doesn't work. You've got to have a formal meditation practice. That is in my opinion. Some people can do it just by regular triggers and reminding themselves during the day to be mindful. I would suggest that a combination of both is optimal, but in my experience, people can maintain present moment awareness more often if they have a sitting practice backing them up.
Let's say if somebody is not able to meditate and not able to sit calmly, can they try something else?
Yeah, absolutely, Nishant. However, in my opinion, I have a crazy busy mind. It's just, that's the way I'm built. I am action focused. I am next, or whatever. And people often say to me, oh, yeah, I know other people can meditate, but you don't know my mind. My mind's so busy, da, 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 da. Anybody can meditate. Anybody can. It's usually the things that people believe about meditation, that they should be able to stop their thoughts, or they have to sit for hours of a day or whatever. These things get in the way. Of course, we can do walking meditation, we can do yoga, we can do all of these things with awareness. We can even go for a run with awareness. And all of those I consider formal practices, to the extent if you are connecting with your physical body and interrupting your mind when it wanders, and graciously and gently returning yourself to the yoga pose, or the breath, or the running, the feeling the feet on the ground. If you're regularly interrupting the mind from wandering and doing that, then yes, I would say it is in a sense a formal practice. But there's so much more to the ethical component of mindful living that I think that a meditation practice actually is kind of essential for. I hate to say that because, I met a guy on a flight to Auckland recently, and he's a very well-known New Zealand person in the mental health space, and a wonderful man. And he said to me, "Oh, I can't meditate. I'm an active relaxer." And I didn't want to argue with this person, but it just reminded me how often people think they can't meditate because they believe a lot of myths around what meditation actually is and what it isn't.
And it requires consistency. I think a lot of people give up before actually practicing it for a number of days. I think if we can practice meditation for 7 to 21 days, then this meditation habit becomes autopilot, and then we can do it for more and more. We get to be consistent about it. And do you have meditation practice in the evening time? Can we have meditation in our morning time or any other time?
Yeah, I mean, mornings are actually best, depending on your lifestyle. And mornings are best because your brain has just come out of sleep. You're coming up through that nice alpha dreamy state. You're not kind of into high beta yet, where you're kind of into the busyness of the day. So mornings are great. We also have lots of routines attached to our morning. So if we can plug in 5 to 10 or 20 minutes of sitting meditation, then fantastic. But for a lot of people, particularly I found people with young children, mornings are not the best time. So I just tend to suggest to people just any time that you do a meditation is a great time. Just try out what works for you and what doesn't work for
Just do
you.
it.
Yeah, just do it. And the other thing, Nishant, I'd really like to say is that we have a hypervigilant, highly distractible mind. Evolutionary wise, we are not built for sitting and pausing and going in. So these practices are quite challenging. And the other thing that I wanted to say about that was, you mentioned, if you can do it for 7 to 21 days, is how easy is it to build a bad habit? It's really easy to build a
It's
bad
really
habit.
easy.
Really easy. You get your immediate little dopamine reward chemistry. I mean, I have a very easy time building a habit of red wine and dark chocolate. Really easy. I love it.
Deadly combination.
Yeah, and I get my immediate reward chemistry, and come 5 o'clock most evenings, I will be looking forward to my red wine. But it's really hard to build good habits. And if anybody has ever tried to build a physical fitness routine in, we know that it's challenging. We know that it's hard. We know that you wouldn't go to the gym once in your life and walk out the door and look down at your body and go, well, that didn't work.
And
We know.
this is very profound. I would like to add one point over here,
Yeah.
and not to interrupt you, that in the society we think about physical fitness. We give a lot of value to the physical fitness, but we forget about our emotional and mental fitness.
Yeah. We're just that fish in the water, really, not seeing the water. We're not seeing the huge impact that the quality of our mind and our ability to be with our emotions has on our lives. So just back to the analogy. So if it takes a while to build a positive habit because we're not getting that immediate reward chemistry, most people give up. Most people go, oh, it's too hard, it's not doing anything, it doesn't feel right. Oh, other people can do it, I can't do it. It's just all too easy to give up, which is why I do the work that I do, which is to support people over that hump until their own reward chemistry kicks in and they start to see the changes in themselves and how they're seeing the world and how they're managing things, and the improvement in their relationships or their ability to be more creative and innovative, or just feeling calmer and less reactive under pressure, all of the things that these practices give us. But getting people to that place is incredibly challenging because we are built for the quick fix. It's kind of like, well, there must be an app for that and I want it to work yesterday. It doesn't work like that. It's a process, and it's a lifetime process, as you know.
And Kerene, what was your challenge in incorporating meditation?
My biggest challenge?
Yes, in the meditation when you started this process.
Probably my biggest challenge was wanting my mind to stop. And every time my mind wandered, and I noticed that my mind had wandered, I would do a mini beat myself up. Okay, back to the practice. And this, of course, like I've been thinking about this recently, because I've been meditating for over 10 years now, formally. And I was wondering to myself, how long does it take your mind to wander when you're meditating? And I reckon my mind goes about 3 to 5 seconds before my mind wanders after all this time. But what I've learnt to do, of course, which is a huge part of these practices, is to understand that that is normal, that is natural, that is the practice. Not beat myself up, and gently kind of just unhook, make thinking less important, come back to the body or the breath. But for me, I'm a big breath person. I really love to focus on my breath. I find it calming and relaxing. So yeah, the biggest difficulty was trying to stop my mind and beating myself up when I noticed my mind wandered.
And in reality, you don't stop your mind. You just
No.
focus your thoughts and release
Yeah.
it and let it go.
Yeah.
And this is all about personal mindfulness. And you work with a lot of executives, leaders, and managers. How
Yeah.
do you train executives and anybody in the corporate world or in any industry to have mindfulness?
Yeah, well, I tend to work with groups. Occasionally I work with leaders one-on-one, but more often it's groups. And I have a 4-week and an 8-week program called My Off Switch. So it's really about, for a lot of people, it's about actually managing their crazy busy office lives. So the program does two things, I would say, is it teaches people how to meditate and how to be mindful, but it also looks at behavior change, because in the business world, when people are not interested in, as I said before, sitting around meditating all day, meditation is really getting us to a place where we can function and perform at our best. So in all of my programs, I get people to have some, what I call, have some skin in the game. So something that they would like to focus on in their own professional world. It might be improving their conversations. It might be having difficult conversations. It might be being more focused and productive. It might be improving their listening skills. It might be operating from a place where they're more creative. It might be being able to live with technology differently. All tons and tons and tons of things. But I just, it's not just about meditating. It's actually about getting people into peak performance states at work and, of course, at home.
Are you saying that we can have all these benefits, such as peak performance, active listening, productivity, dealing with people in a better way? Can we have all these things through meditation?
No, I don't think we can. I think that meditation sets us up to be able to see clearly, to be the observer of our thoughts and emotions and not just lost in them. So we're coming at life from a different place. I think the point that I'm trying to make here is, and it comes back to that ethical component of mindfulness, is about understanding that it's about really a values-aligned way of living. And if I come back to the point that I made before in my own life, I didn't really know what my values were, what was important to me. And in the business world, we often have a few values up on the wall, useless, by the way. But if a business really knows their values, and if a business group of people are really connected to those values and they know the behaviors that go with those values and the behaviors that don't, and they practice mindfulness, they're far more likely to live into those values that they aspire to than not. I hope that makes sense, Nishant.
Yeah, it does make sense. Do you ever get a pushback from corporate leaders that this is not for them?
Very rarely, to be honest. I do not work with groups who have not volunteered to do the programs. That's the very first thing. Because if you ever have somebody who has been, I don't know if you've heard the saying, we have it in New Zealand, they've been voluntold to do something. Their manager wants them to do it, but they don't want to do it. You don't want that in a group. You don't want to be forcing people to do anything they don't want to do. So, I work with groups that are interested, they're open, they're keen to learn. And I find that I come at mindfulness, sounds a bit like marketing 101, but we're all experiencing challenges today. So when I start working with groups, I will talk about the pain of the modern workplace, and that's an acronym for P is increasing pressure and stress, A is this always on action orientated way of being, the I is information overload, and the N is non-stop distractions. Everybody can relate to those things.
Everybody, yes.
Everybody. So I start there, and then, if you'll forgive me, I then hit them with science. And as you know, the science has exploded in recent years. Some of it's not very good science, but the science is there. The science is solid and getting more and more solid all the time. So I'm not interested in having arguments with people about whether these practices work or not. I'm more interested in getting people excited about trying out these practices and seeing what happens for themselves. And as we said before, if I can get people through those first few weeks, I have never, ever had anybody said to me, nah, it's not for me, didn't find any difference. Everybody will say, wow, this practice has completely transformed my life.
And that's why you have 4 to 8 weeks program. It's not 1 day or 2 day program. Nothing is going to happen in a day or two. It takes weeks of consistent practice.
Yeah. And it's really challenging to get that consistent practice in. One of the things that I've really loved in the workplace is groups who actually put up physical spreadsheets where they tick off each day when they've done their practice and have a bit of a competition. You know, like I think we're all 3-year-olds really. We like our gold star. So if you can get some healthy competition in the workplace, that tends to help people to do the practice, but also getting people to practice together. So setting up opportunities for people to do 5 or 10 minutes together in the workplace is really great.
And how can we resolve conflicts in the team through mindfulness?
Well, if there's conflict, there's always an unmet need behind that conflict. And people are either aware of it or they're not. And if there's conflict, it could be different values. But it's usually to do whatever is underlying it. It will be the communication that hasn't worked so far, if you like. And it's usually has to do with not being clear about your intention in your own communication and not really listening to another person's point of view. So, you know, like if you can get people to see clearly what their intention is in their communication, and to notice if they're coming at their communication from a negative, judgmental, critical place, or an open, generous listening space, that's the first thing. And with mindfulness is awareness of what you're actually doing, of what's actually going on, of where you're actually coming from. And then the other practice with mindfulness is to be so aware that you know when you're not listening, so you can interrupt yourself and return yourself to that open listening place. Or
This is a very common theme when our mind keeps wandering here and there and we are not actively listening. And it's a notice moment for anybody, if you happen to be in that situation, to bring your awareness back to the present moment. And that requires consistent mindfulness practice.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, you know, I had an experience over the last few weeks of watching two people whose communication broke down. And what I saw was two people who had unmet needs but weren't comfortable sharing with each other what they needed. They just created a story in their own minds of what the other person was doing, why they were doing it, why the other person was wrong, and why they were right to be offended and upset. So I saw that there was there just wasn't the ability to have an open discussion about what was really going on because of fear of opening up the conflict. You know, like conflict is one thing, we fear conflict, but we often fear opening up to the conflict, because conflict can be really healthy if you can deliver a message in a way that is actually asking for what you need and not putting the other person down.
And it requires being vulnerable to resolve that conflict.
Yeah.
I would like to shift some gears over here, Kerene. So your book came out, Crazy Busy. So who is this book for?
I originally, Nishant, wrote the book. I started writing the book to support people who were doing my programs, to give more depth, more detail, more exploration, just more information, more support. And I was challenged very early on by a mentor of mine to write more about my own background story, how I came to mindfulness, my messy bits, he called them. He said, I really love reading about your messy bits, you know, the stuff that's happened to you. So the book is infiltrated really with my messy bits and stories, as well as chapters on supporting the program. And of course, the book comes with the Mindful at Work app. So the program is in there, and the Mindful at Work app is currently free, and people can actually just start it up, start doing the practices themselves. So yeah, that's a bit of background, I suppose, on the book, Nishant.
Yeah, and you talk about debunking the myths. Can you tell us more on that, please?
Yeah, it comes back to that comment that I was saying before. A lot of people think they can't meditate because they've got a faulty idea about what meditation is. So I just have a chapter in there on a few of the common myths. You know, the most common is, oh, I tried, but I can't stop my thoughts. And that's not what we're trying to do. It is not for one moment. We're trying to be able to have more awareness of our thoughts and our emotions, not trying to stop things. So that's probably the most common one. I occasionally get people who say, oh, no, this is against my religion, but I'm not going to talk about that on your podcast, because I notice that I get very annoyed about that. Yeah, just lots of
we can park the topic. We can park the topic of religion aside, but I would love to explore more on why a religious person cannot meditate. So I think this is a myth. This is my opinion, but I would love to explore more on that later on.
Well, it doesn't come up very often, but I suppose what I notice that I juggle in myself is whenever I hear that, I juggle an immediate emotional, angry reaction in myself, which is never going to be useful in that situation with somebody. And I just actually try to listen to what that person is trying to say to me, and if they are open, to give them information. That's the best I can do there.
And is this book available in New Zealand only, or is it available in other parts of the world?
It's actually now up on Amazon, so as an e-book on for Kindle. It's also on iTunes, I believe. It is available from my website in New Zealand, and I will post it to people. But it would be reasonably expensive, I would imagine, to get it to the United States. So I think Kindle would probably, e-read would be the best thing. But it is available. Yeah, it's really interesting. As you know, New Zealand, as we record this, we're currently in lockdown. So in March, early March, I had a lot of television and radio events promoting the book, and now, of course, no bookstores are open in New Zealand. So the books are sitting in a warehouse somewhere with my distributor. So the world has changed very quickly over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I will put the details in the show notes, and if anybody is interested, they can get it from Amazon.
Sure.
And Kerene, where can people find you online?
My website is Mindful at Work, proper at, not a little symbol, but mindful
It's at
work.co.nz. And you can also find me actually on a new website that I just launched yesterday with 3 other women, workingwellathome.com. And that's supporting people through, current issues that we're facing throughout the world, not just mindfulness, but leading teams, wellness, setting up home offices, etc. But my website is Mindful at Work. You can find me, of course, Kerene Strochnetter on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I have no idea what I'm doing on Twitter. I occasionally go there, but I do put stuff up. So yeah, that's me. And the Mindful at Work website does have a link for the book Crazy Busy, which does come with as I said, an app and a free downloadable workbook as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Kerene. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Nishant. It was really lovely talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. I hope you learned from this episode that you can apply in your life. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to the podcast, The Nishant Garg Show, on Apple Podcast. You can also subscribe to the show through my website, https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this podcast with your family and friends or whoever want to feel fulfilled. And thank you so much again.